Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at another compact laptop from Lenovo. This is the IdeaPad Slim 7, and it has an i5 processor along with an Nvidia MX350 GPU inside. And we're going to take a look and see how this 14-inch laptop stacks up in just a second. But I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that this is on loan from Lenovo. So when we're done with this, it goes back to them. All the opinions you're about to hear are my own. No one is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what this laptop is all about. Now, the price point on this is $769 as configured, although the price will vary based on the retailer and its specific configuration. All of the IdeaPad Slim 7 14s have a 14-inch display. This one is a 1080p 14-inch display, IPS, covers 100% of sRGB, and it's running at about 300 nits of brightness. As you can see, it is a very reflective display, and it's not a touch display either. So if you don't like shiny displays, this one may not be it for you. But I was very satisfied with the brightness and the overall image quality here. Very nice for essentially a low-cost laptop, at least based on the configuration here. Inside, we've got an i5 1035G1 processor that is paired up with the MX350 GPU from Nvidia. And that GPU has 2 gigabytes of dedicated video memory on board, which is separate from the 8 gigabytes of system RAM on the motherboard. Just note that the system RAM is not upgradable. It's soldered on, so whatever you buy is what you'll have forever. You can, though, upgrade the storage, but it does come with a 512 gigabyte NVMe SSD, which I think is a nice amount of storage to start with at the price point. Weight on this one is 3.31 pounds or 1.5 kilograms. Not all that heavy. The build quality is excellent. It's all metal, so it's got a nice premium feel to it. It's not all that large either, so it's a nice little laptop to carry around that's got a decent amount of capabilities, given that you've got that GPU built in. What's also nice about it is that it's pretty well balanced, although it's got a pretty strong magnet here on the display lid. Once you get the two parts separated there, you can move the display around here without taking the keyboard deck with you, and that's always a good sign of a well-engineered laptop. So overall, I really like the fit and finish of this one. Now, the keyboard and trackpad here are standard Lenovo fare. Very nice keys, good travel to them, very comfortable to type on. The keyboard is backlit, and you've got a very nice, accurate trackpad here. Lenovo's been doing a great job with input on their laptops for quite some time, and this one is a continuation of that. You also have upward-firing stereo speakers here on the left and right. They're pretty good for what they are. You'll probably want to attach headphones to get a deeper and broader range of sound, but overall for laptop speakers, they do pretty nice, and I always prefer having upward-firing speakers versus downward-firing ones. There's a bunch of ports on here, and there's actually a Thunderbolt 3 port on the Intel version of this laptop, and that, of course, gives you a lot of flexibility for expansion. And if you decided that that MX350 GPU isn't powerful enough for you, you can attach an external GPU through that Thunderbolt port and get better performance when you're docked on your desk. We've covered those here in the past. You also have a power connector here, which is a USB Type-C port. This port will do power and data. It is a 5 gigabit per second data port, but it doesn't do display output. The HDMI here, of course, will output to a display. This is a full-size HDMI. The Thunderbolt will do all of your Thunderbolt devices along with USB devices, and it supports display out, and it supports power in. So you do have a full-service port here. This one does everything but video. You got a headphone jack over there, and then on the other side, you've got 2 full-size USB 3 ports and a micro SD card reader as well, along with the power switch. This is not a fanless laptop, so you do have some venting here on the bottom, but it's not very loud, and we'll talk about its thermal performance as we get our way further through the review. Now, of course, this laptop will do well for Zoom calls and other online meetings. You've got a webcam here at the top. It's 720p, nothing spectacular from an image quality standpoint, but good enough to get your calls done, as you can see. That was an image sample from the camera. Unlike, though, other Lenovo laptops we've looked at recently, this one doesn't have a shutter over the lens. A lot of the other Lenovo laptops do have that, but it's lacking on this one. Battery life I expect to be about 8 to 10 hours on this, and that's assuming you're keeping the display brightness down and not getting that GPU involved with what you're doing. The GPU will largely be inactive when you're just browsing the web and doing some basic tasks on the machine. When you start doing video editing or gaming or anything else that will need more graphical horsepower, it will switch over to that GPU automatically, and that will of course consume battery life more dramatically. But for the most part, it does have competitive battery life with other notebooks at its size and price point. All right, let's take a look now and see how it performs. We'll begin with the basics, a little web browsing. We'll pull up the Chrome browser and go to the nasa.gov homepage. As you can see here, everything comes up very quickly. The rendering is very quick and snappy, and this is what I would expect out of a machine running with this hardware. We are on my AC wireless network, but this does support Wi-Fi 6 as well, so you should see pretty quick Wi-Fi performance on here, but of course you could always plug in an Ethernet adapter to one of the USB-C or Thunderbolt ports on the laptop. And a little bit earlier, we tried out some video playback on YouTube. This is a 1080p 60 video. We didn't see any noticeable drop frames. It did drop one when it first got started, but it generally was able to keep up without issue with high frame rate video, so it should do well for Netflix and other video applications as well. And on the browserbench.org speedometer test, we got a score of 212 on version 1.0 of that test and 112 on version 2.0. That is a great score and competitive with some i7 chips from the same generation we've looked at recently on other computers. And that just goes to show you that for the basics, an i5 processor for most people should be enough. Now, I also want you to take a look at the Lenovo IdeaPad Flex 5 on the chart. That's running with one of the newer AMD processors. And although on this browser test it doesn't seem to do quite as well as the Intel chip does here, you will see something very different when it comes to gaming. So let's get into the gaming test now, and we'll talk a little bit more about AMD versus Intel. So we're going to kick things off here with Fortnite, and we ran it at 1080p at the lowest settings. And as you can see here, we're running north of 60 frames per second. A lot of variability there, of course, but we're getting between about 85 and 110 frames per second on the ground. When we ran it at high quality at 1080p, we were between 35 and 50. So I think you could probably find some middle ground to have Fortnite run here at a solid 60 frames per second. Next, we checked out The Witcher 3. This is 1080p at the lowest settings here. And as you can see, we're running at about 30 to 40 frames per second, so not bad for a little laptop like this. And of course, we're helped by the fact that we do have that discrete GPU on board, so pretty good output there. We also ran GTA 5, again 1080p at the lowest settings, and we were getting really good frame rates on this one, about 70 to 80 frames per second, sometimes going a little beyond that. And again, you can tweak the settings to get a little bit better image quality, yet still be at around 60 or so. We also ran Rocket League, and this was at the lowest settings, 1080p, and as you can see here, we were well north of 100 frames per second most of the time. And of course, we could probably run this at higher settings and still be at or near 60. Now, we also ran the 2016 version of Doom, again 1080p lowest settings, and we were getting between 45 and 50 frames per second. So altogether, a pretty nice experience with this little GPU. And it's nice to see this kind of gaming performance out of a compact laptop like this. And on the 3D Mark CloudGate benchmark test, we got a score of 16,118. And as you can see here, the AMD Ryzen-based computers are very competitive with this Intel Nvidia combination, and those AMD devices don't have a discrete GPU. And the reason why I keep bringing up AMD is because there is a version of this laptop outside the US with an AMD configuration. And if you have the choice, you might want to look at that. I don't know what the price differentials are outside the US on it, but it's very interesting to see just how competitive those AMD APUs are versus something with an actual discrete GPU. We've got one more benchmark test to look at, and that is the 3D Mark Time Spy, which can be a little bit more demanding. Let's see what we got there. And on that test, we got a score of 537, which is significantly lower than what we got out of the Flex 5 with its AMD processor. And what was odd about that test result is that when I went back to the Flex 5 review and looked at the gameplay footage, I noticed the frame rates on the games we tested, which were the same ones we tested here, were a little better on the Nvidia Intel combo versus the AMD APU on the Flex 5. And I suspect what's going on here is thermal throttling. And I think these benchmarks might work the computer a little harder during the benchmarking versus the games when you're playing them. And as a result, I think we're seeing scores a little bit lower than they should be, but still, the two are very competitive here. So we did run the 3D Mark stress test earlier, and there we got a score of 93% on the IdeaPad Slim 7. And that's a failing grade, which indicates you are going to see a lot more variability in frame rate and performance when the system is placed under heavy sustained load. And these benchmarks tend to hit it with heavy load right out of the gate. And I think that's why the scores are a little different here. But again, the AMDs are super competitive against a discrete GPU combo here. And I think that is something that is really interesting. And again, if you have an opportunity to look at an AMD-based device, it will be very close to what you're seeing out of something with a lot more hardware on board. Now, usually at the end of these reviews, we like to test out its Linux compatibility with Ubuntu. Unfortunately, we were not able to get Ubuntu to boot up on this thing no matter what we tried, so we're not able to give you a thorough test on that. But it does run, of course, very nicely with Windows, although I would have loved to have tried an AMD version of this to do a real head-to-head comparison between an Intel Nvidia combo device with the single chip AMD. But nonetheless, I think the performance will be close between the two variants, although this one will have a lot more hardware on board, and this one might have a little more thermal throttling versus its AMD sibling. But again, without that one in here to test, we can't make a firm determination on that. But still, for a 14-inch laptop, it is very nicely performing. You can run a lot of AAA game titles on here with reasonable settings. I love the fact that it's got a Thunderbolt 3 port, and all in, it's got very solid build quality, and that's something that I like in one of these super portable laptops. That's going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Tom Albrecht, Chris Allegretta, Mike Patterson, and Bill Pomerantz. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.